Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. You are watching Heidi Creates and I am Heidi. If you are anything like me, you just cannot resist the temptation of beautiful put together fabrics that come in these wonderful jelly rolls. And not always, do we buy like enough to make like a quilt or something, and we don't even necessarily want a project that's that ambitious. And so we've got these jelly rolls just sitting around looking so pretty and on our shelves and in our fabric bins. Well, I want to show you today a wonderful use for jelly rolls. This was totally inspired by Jenny from Missouri Star Quilt. I had seen a video that she had done on how to make bunting, and I really liked the way that she had made it. And there was a couple of things that I did differently than what she did. I had these jelly rolls and thought, I like the festivity of all these different fabrics, and so I would like to use a jelly roll in making the bunting. And so that's what I ended up doing. So you can see here I have these beautiful gold fabrics, gold and white. I made this one using 5 strips of the jelly roll. Cute Christmas ones here that have the buffalo plaid. One thing that's kind of neat about this particular way that I made these buntings is that they are reversible. So you can have this one side where you have the diagonal of the jelly strips, and then on the back side it has a different pattern. You can see there's vertical and horizontal lines. You don't have to use jelly rolls. If you don't have jelly rolls, you can actually just use any size square fabric. Today I'm going to be using this really cute pink and gray black jelly roll. There's 20 strips in here, and there are 10 designs, 2 strips each of each design. These are 2.5 inches wide and 42 inches long. 1 jelly roll, and then you also are going to need a length of bias tape or double fold tape. You can either make it yourself and do like a 1/2 inch size. You can buy pre-made. Stick around and let's have some fun at the sewing machine today. The first thing that you need to decide when making your jelly roll bunting is how many strips that you want to sew together. This particular bunting is pretty big. I decided to sew 5 strips together, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5. I'm only going to sew 4 strips together. So here's 1, 2, 3, and 4. You need to get your jelly roll opened up. And I'm not going to do that on camera because it takes too much time. But get your jelly roll opened up, and then let's start dividing up those strips. So like I said, there are 10 designs in this particular jelly roll, and each design has 2. So I'm going to divide these up. I'd like to get some light and darks evenly mixed. In this particular jelly roll, there are 3 pinks. So I've divided them 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I got 3 of the gray black fabrics in between each of the pinks, so I'm trying to use those up evenly. I'm going to start using this pink here, and I'm going to sew 4 strips together. So I'm going to sew this strip, this one, this one, this one. Then the next time I sew strips together, it'll be this one, this one, this one, this one. And then so forth. Pretty much just however you want to divide it up and get your colors mixed together. But I'm going to go ahead and sew 4 of the jelly roll strips together, starting with the pink on this end. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I actually have all the strips sewn together in groups of 4, as you can see here. And I'm going to go ahead and give them a press now. I'm just going to go ahead and press them, the seam allowances, in just to one direction. If you have been doing the math with me along the way, I told you that this jelly roll had a total of 20 strips at 2.5 inches wide, and I decided to sew them together in groups of 4. So that gives me 5 of these assembled strips of fabric. This is 8.5 inches wide. And so what I want to do is I want to trim my beginning end, make it straight, and then cut squares from this. So if it's 8.5 inches wide, then I need to obviously cut each piece, each square, 8.5 inches. And that should give me a total of 5 squares, about 5 squares from each of these strips. 5 strips, 5 pieces from each one. I should get about 25 of the bunting triangles. So there we have one of our squares. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all these strips up into squares. Cut your squares and stack them into their matching groups. Okay, and we'll come back after that. I have all my strips cut up into 8.5 inch squares. Our next step is now to take each of those squares. We're going to fold them in half diagonally. Along one edge, going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance and close that up into a triangle. I am going to snip the tip so that when I go to turn this right side out, it'll be a sharper point actually. I've sewn that to a triangle. Once I have this turned out, I lay it down and I have the seam allowance on the top, and I just kind of look at it so it's lined up with the point. And this is one of the ways that I differ from Jenny, to have no raw edges showing whatsoever. I'm actually taking this flap, and you can, if you want to, you can press it, kind of finger press it, so you know envelope right inside. Make that even with this raw edge. Give that a press. And then when we go to assemble this, the binding is actually going to sandwich right around that. And that's what makes this reversible then, is because there aren't any raw edges. I'm going to go ahead and sew all these triangles up, press them, and then we will go to the next step. One of the things that I wanted to point out, I try to fold these in such a way that I make sure that my seam allowances are on the top, and they're all going in the direction that I'm going to be sewing. Just a personal preference for me. I don't have to worry about those accidentally pulled up the wrong direction and causing puckers or anything. Well, good morning, everybody. Today is actually the next day. I didn't get to finish recording yesterday. I had other things to do, but I've got my mocha and I'm ready to go. Let's get this finished up. So what we have is all of our little triangles made. They're so adorable and pretty and very pink. And I'm pretty sure my granddaughter will be in love with these. Let's go ahead and get started with the next part. This is actually the last step to making these, so we're almost done. So before we begin sewing on the binding to our triangles, we need to figure out how much binding we're going to need. So when I measured these triangles across the top, it's about 7 inches. And if I have 25 of those, I want to take 25 times the 7, and that will tell me how many inches that is. Then you're going to take the amount of spacing that you want to do between each of these little flags. Decide to go about a 1/2 inch. So take a 1/2 inch times 25, and then whatever you want for your tie ends. And I do about 10 inches on each end. You take those 3 figures and you add them up, and that's going to give you your total inches. Now, if you divide that by 12, that will give you your total feet. And then if you divide that number by 3, that will tell you how many yards you need. And for me, it was just under 6 yards. Just happened to have these 2 packages of binding, 6 yards total. I don't normally use a binding that's this wide. I had this on hand and let's use it. It still looks good and you can tie it. There's not a problem with that. Usually I do about a 1/2 inch wide or a 3/8 inch wide binding. This will work just fine. Now what I want to do is I want to show you how I'm going to do a finished end. So I'm going to open up the binding all the way and fold it the opposite direction. And I'm just going to give it a quick 1/4 inch seam allowance. And doing it this way just eliminates a lot of bulk. And trim this even closer, about 1/8 of an inch or so. Turn that right side out again. Just allow those folds to go right back to where they were. And that gives you a finished end. I'm going to mark off about 10 inches here. And that will be the start. You can mark it. Look at purchased binding. You will notice that one edge is longer than the other. And they do that so that when you're sewing from the shorter side, that the long edge is actually being caught. We want to have that whiter edge on the bottom. We're just going to open up the binding so that it goes on either side of that flag, and then we'll sew 1/8 of an inch away from the folded edge. Turn it this way. This will be the right way. Well, it takes me a minute, doesn't it? I'm going to start where I did the finished end, so all the way down. I push the flag all the way up, the triangle, all the way up to this inside edge, 1/8 of an inch away from this edge. Catch all the layers, and it's going to totally enclose the raw edge that we still had along that top. I'm just making sure that my triangle is pushed up all the way into this fold right here. Here's one of the things I wanted to also bring to your attention. I don't necessarily want all my matching ones to be right next to each other, so I'm going to separate them. I separate them into their color groups. So here's these all match, so I put them in a different pile. And all the ones that match, I put them into their own pile. When I sew them together, I'll take one from a different pile each time so that I'm not putting together triangles right next to each other, triangles that match. So I hope that makes sense. So here's a different one. Open up the binding here. And you can actually make it so that the very corners of the triangles touch. That way you'd get a pretty exact distance apart, and they're still 1/2 inch apart here, but they're touching up here inside where you can't see them. Grabbing from a different pile. So I think you get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and continue on and show you what we have as a finished product. I decided to divide my triangles up into 2 groups and make 2 separate buntings. And this one I actually put a white binding on and sewed it with a contrasting pink thread. Usually when I do contrasting thread in top stitching, I will increase my stitch length from 2.5 to 3 millimeter. It just tends to give it a little bit neater look. But let me know in the comments below. Just let me know which one you like the best. Did you like the pink better, or did you like the white binding better? Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed that and that you also give this a try. It's really fun. There's so many fabrics out there. You could really, decorate a bedroom or any room for that matter nicely with some bunting. You can do it on windows, anywhere really. And they're not just for holidays or parties, but they can be for your everyday living, just to dress up a room. But if you're interested in any of the bunting that I have right now,
I do have it on my website, so you can check that out. I have a link below in the comments. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next time on Heidi Creates.